Friends, visitors, and guests to the Thomas Jefferson Unitarian Church. I am Alan Godsave, a member of the Board of Trustees. Unitarian Universalists are about inclusiveness. We have no religious creed or dogma, but we do have principles, and those principles focus on the human experience and on human aspirations. Our focus is not on any afterlife, our focus is on this life. We seek to nurture the best in each of us. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. If you are visiting with us, we invite you to contact the church office to speak with the membership coordinator, Janet Taylor, about receiving our newsletter and email updates. And visit our TJUC website and Facebook page. And please join us after the service today as we chat amongst ourselves. We would love to get to know you. I have 3 announcements this morning. Church Administrator Debbie Horvey will be on vacation August 13 through 23. The church office will be closed during that time. In the event of an emergency, a true emergency, contact Reverend Kathy for help. With respect to our church's name change, please know that Daniel Sturdivant has taken a close look, a wonderful look at the names of other UU congregations, and he gives us his really great analysis. To see that, please look at the link to Daniel's piece in the August newsletter. And finally, coffee chats are at 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday and happy hour on Fridays at 5 p.m. Links are up on the website and newcomers are welcome. This Wednesday, our special guest will be Katie Donner, our new choir director. Join us to meet our newest member of the staff. Thank you, and now we return to the sanctuary.
We light a flaming chalice to lift up the beloved community that we create together and to honor our heritage as Unitarian Universalists. If you have a candle or chalice handy, please light it as we read our chalice lighting words. And as always, children and youth in your homes are warmly invited to act as chalice lighters today. We say together, we light our chalice to remind us when the mind knows, we call it knowledge. When the heart knows, we call it love. When the being knows, we call it prayer.
Our opening words this morning are by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I lie awake at night in fear of what my life and my children's lives may yet become, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things that do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still waters, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Some of you may know of a wonderful book called Granddad's Prayers of the Earth, written by Douglas Wood. That book, and also a children's message by Reverend Liz Weber, inspired what I'll share with you today. So in the story, a grandfather and a child went for a walk in the woods. I wonder if that's an experience you may have shared with someone you care about. Well, while they were walking, listening to birds and hearing the wind rustling in the trees, the child asked, "Granddad, tell me about prayer." Well, that's a big thing to ask about, isn't it? And the grandfather said, "All living beings of the world pray. Each living thing gives its life to the beauty of all life, and that gift is its prayer." That's a big answer. So as the two walk in the woods, Granddad tells the child more of what he means. And this morning, I'd like to invite all of us to imagine going on that walk together and to experience some of the ways that Granddad talks about prayer. So I'd like to invite those who are comfortable doing so to get up with me and stand. Or you can imagine walking while you're in your chair. You don't have to actually be walking if that's not comfortable for you. You may want to push your chair aside if you choose to stand up so that you'll have a little bit more room to move. So let's imagine ourselves walking together in the woods, and we're going to imagine that Granddad and the child are walking with us. And the first thing we notice is the trees all around us. And Granddad says, "Look at that tree. Look how it's reaching up so tall, reaching toward the sun and the moon and the stars and the clouds, always trying to connect up and up, connecting everywhere." That connecting is a way to pray. So as we imagine being trees reaching up together and reaching out, we can imagine how it feels to pray like a tree, reaching up to grow and connect. And as we walk along, we come to a big rock beside the path. And Granddad says, "Look at that rock. That rock is still and quiet. It's sitting there and listening to everything that is going on in our world." Being still and listening is another way to pray. So we can practice being like a rock, curled up or crouched in some way. And as we imagine praying like a rock, we can imagine how that feels. And the next thing we come to is a stream. And you know that sometimes streams are very active and burbly, almost like they're giggling or dancing. And it turns out that moving can also be a good way to pray. And sometimes during a storm, the water might get really rough with waves that leap and crash over the rocks. And sometimes the water can be very quiet and calm and peaceful. So whatever type of water you feel like today, just know that that way of feeling or expressing yourself, that way of moving, can be a good way to pray. Notice what you're feeling right now. And so we continue on our walk. We cross a bridge over the stream and we come to a big open field filled with wildflowers, flowers everywhere, as far as our eyes can see. And Granddad says, "Look at the flowers. They're blooming and sharing their scent, giving it out to the world for anyone to breathe it in and enjoy." And so as we imagine doing that, know that giving of ourselves is also a good way to pray. Imagine how that feels. And finally, we arrive back at Granddad's house, and the child says, "But wait, Granddad, we were out in nature and that was great, but now we're just back in the house. So now I wonder if people pray." Ah, yes, of course people pray. Sometimes we pray with our actions when we're trying to help someone, to make our world a better place, or to show someone our love. That's an important way to pray. And sometimes we pray with our words. If we're feeling thankful or maybe very sad, or if a problem comes up that feels just too big to solve by ourselves. Sometimes using words in a prayer helps. And sometimes we pray just by sitting very still in a quiet place. But, Granddad, what are the right words? How will I know if I have the right words in my prayer? Oh, you don't need to worry about that. If your words feel real and true and they come from your heart, then those are the right words for you. So, I'd like to invite you all to put your hands on your heart. You can close your eyes if you'd like and just see if there are any words there that feel real and true that you may want to express right now. You can go ahead and say those words if they are there, or you can hold them quietly. And if they're not there, that's okay too. My prayer for all of you is that you know how much all of us at this church love and care about you, and how glad we are that you are part of our community today and always.
While the church may be physically closed, all the other operations of the church continue virtually, which means the expenses of being a church continue. We depend on the generosity of your contributions to do all that the church does. We invite you to continue those contributions as you have so generously done in the past. You can send them in virtually through our website. We also still haven't forgotten how to handle actual checks that are mailed to us. As always, thank you for your generosity. I would not have considered giving a sermon on prayer in a Unitarian Universalist church, because many of the congregations I first work with might well have asked me to leave if I even suggested such a thing. I don't entirely understand that hostility, but it is a relief to find it becoming rarer now in our churches. We're able to live more fully into the spirit of exploration that we hold as a guiding principle, and acknowledge that exploration does sometimes take us into areas of discomfort in order to discover deeper truths. Even so, I admit feeling still a bit of uncertainty about the wisdom of bringing you a sermon on prayer, however apropos prayer might be during the extraordinary and difficult experience of a pandemic. And I suspect some of you are already signing off Zoom to do what you regard as more worthwhile actions than listen to a minister talking about prayer. Prayer is not an activity that shows up very often on Sundays in UU churches. Meditation, yes. Prayer, not so much. While all spiritual traditions include teachings about prayer, we UUs still seem to prefer to tiptoe around it. Some of our squeamishness is likely the result of prayer raising that sticky God question. So we're unsure of who or what a prayer is being addressed to. Or we avoid prayer because prayer implies a kind of subservient stance towards the universe, in which one is always begging for something, or because prayer conjures up silly images of magical occurrences. There are many viable reasons why one might say that Unitarian Universalists are not the praying types. Or maybe we are. If the definition of prayer can be expanded a bit beyond the conventional notion that prayer is talking to God. That's a useful starting point. It is a viable definition, provided one is considering what prayer means for children, or what prayer is like for someone who is just beginning their spiritual journey. Prayer is talking to God at a basic level. Move beyond that basic level, and prayer can no longer be described as talking to God. And along with that definition of prayer, that it's talking to God, we can also jettison some of those other misconceptions of prayer, such as prayer involving a subservient relationship, or prayer invoking magical occurrences, or prayer being about begging for things. All those characterizations of prayer, again, do have validity, a limited validity, when one is considering the prayers of children, or the prayers offered by a person in the primary stages of spiritual development. So set aside those limited conceptions of prayer, and we start to enter more ambiguous territory, where prayer begins to look quite different from a conversation with God about whatever I decided I want right now. It eludes easy or precise definition. The prayer terrain becomes even more of a minefield when we consider the notion of praying for somebody. What does it mean to bring another person into that practice, when we can feel confident that they want to be in our prayers, or maybe even without their consent? Sometimes on Sundays when we share joys or concerns, the joy or concern includes a request for prayer. What's being asked of us in those requests? How is it different, if it is different, from the phrases that also show up in our joys and concerns, phrases about holding someone in my thoughts? Is something different going on if I pray for you as opposed to holding you in my thoughts? My youngest sister is married to a Christian pastor on the staff of a large traditional church. She mentioned to me once about volunteering in the prayer room. Curious, I asked for more information, and she described the setup. A small, quiet space in the church. The prayer room had a couple of comfortable chairs, several copies of the Bible in various translations, and a carefully prepared list of the names of people who had either requested or been determined by others to need prayers said for them. Kind of their version, if you will, of how we share joys and concerns. The church members would volunteer to spend time, typically an hour a week, in the prayer room, reviewing the list of prayer needs and offering prayer for those individuals and their needs. For like it or not, prayer for other people seems to be a key part of this whole prayer business. Television religious personalities pull in significant sums of money by praying for other people. Traditional religious services almost always include a time set aside to offer prayers for others. And I would bet that many of you joining the service today have probably yourself been prayed for. I've been prayed for countless times by people known to me and people I never knew. Those prayers have been for my healing when I was ill, for my comfort when I was grieving, for my peace of mind when my mind was far from peaceful, for my safe travel and safe return from travel, for my guidance in making crucial decisions, for my good fortune when I took risks, for a change of fortune when those risks weren't working out, for the salvation of my soul whenever I was on a course that seemed destined to take me far from God and maybe even straight to hell. So I know well what it means and how it feels to hear someone say, "I'm praying for you." And I have to say that all too often, hearing somebody say, "I'm praying for you," has not left me with a good feeling. Quite the contrary, someone says to me, "I'm praying for you," and I may well feel, instead of comforted, reassured, or cared about, which I do believe is usually what the person who says those words intends, I feel trivialized, dismissed, misunderstood. Though I'm typically polite enough to thank the person for their prayers, or at least to just smile in response, what I sometimes want to do is decline their prayer, to ask them to leave God out of the matter, to say that while your prayers are nice, I could use some concrete help from you. And on more than one occasion, I would have loved when the person promised to pray for me to tell them, "Just go away." So where is this hostility to being prayed for? Why not just accept it for what it is, a kind of offer of help, whether I believe in that kind of help or not, and figure I can use whatever help I can get? Well, I have known some individuals whose prayers for me I can accept gratefully and feel the reassurance and comfort they intend. From others who promise to pray for me, I hear in those words an unwillingness to engage me, to hear me out, to offer substantive help. Instead, they glibly hand me off to God, preferring to let God deal with me so they won't have to spend precious time trying to listen and understand. Without knowing me in any depth, those prayers for me have already determined what I need and are going to ensure that I get it, whether I want it or not, by calling in the Almighty to take care of matters. That's an extreme interpretation, I understand, but I don't take prayer lightly. And I have even less regard for its glib and all too frequent misuse. To me, less time praying and more time just listening to one another is what the world really needs. I'm praying for you. Those words are more than just the title of this sermon and more than just a description of a common and sometimes not particularly useful encounter many of us experience. Because the fact is, I pray for you, the members and friends of this church. Now, I hasten to add, in case that makes you squeamish, that in acknowledging I pray for you, I'm not saying that I go off and chat with God about you, or that I beg for things to come your way, or that I'm invoking magical interventions on your part in your lives, though maybe you might sometimes wish I would if I had a direct line to some sort of Unitarian Universalist God. I don't pray for you in what I believe are misconceptions of prayer. What I do, rather, is best described by a Quaker definition of prayer for others. To pray for someone according to this definition is to hold that person in the light. The person's name or face is called up, visualized, held as a focus of attention, in an attitude of waiting, listening, watching, honoring our connection with each other, honoring our connection to all of life. In this kind of praying for another, nothing is asked for, nothing is expected, and this is the most crucial part, no change in the person being prayed for is intended. Instead, the person being prayed for is simply cherished as they are, who they are, just as they are. To which those who prefer the versions of prayer that makes things happen, that brings results like unexpected healing or amazing good fortune or saved souls, might wonder, well, what's the point of that? If praying for another is merely holding them in the light without pressing for some sort of change, why bother? My answer, an answer that continually surprises me, is this. That sort of prayer does result in change, often remarkable change. The surprise is that the change that comes from that sort of prayer is a change that happens to me. When I pray for somebody, holding the person in the light, I discover again and again that my understanding of them, my feelings about them, my sense of our relationship, that shifts. What happens in this sort of praying for another is that any of the typical challenges or frustrations that come up in any relationship, they seem to just not matter so much. Sometimes they even disappear. I find that I no longer care much, if at all, about how stubborn I think you are, or how you refuse to do what I want you to do, or the ways you resist all the changes I believe you need to make. All those ego-driven concerns of mine go away when I hold someone in the light, and they're replaced by a new appreciation for your presence in my life, the unique and wonderful way you have of being in the world, the gift that you are. Held in the light, I can remember that the other person and I are both part of the interconnected web of existence, both God's children, both persons of inherent worth and dignity, carrying the divine seed in the center of our souls. And when that prayer is finished, the person may be no richer, no healthier, no closer to being saved, no more cooperative than before, but I'm different. Different in a way that can only enhance our relationship. As Universalist minister Lon Ray Call put it, prayer doesn't change things, prayer changes people, and people change things. Oh, I may start out praying for you to change you, and then I discover that in praying for you, I change me. So prayer for others becomes a prayer that impacts the individual praying and then moves outwards. Notice that nowhere in that process is any sort of God belief assumed, meaning that prayer can be effective regardless of what one thinks about God. And one can pray for another person without spiritually pushing them around in some way, since prayer for others ultimately turns back onto the one praying, challenging me to take a closer look at how I see you. Poet W.H. Auden saw this as the essence of prayer, suggesting that to pray is to pay attention to something or someone other than oneself. Whatever is compelling enough to draw my attention away from the endlessly fascinating parade of my own thoughts and feelings and impulses and desires and fears, whatever can thwart our natural tendency to self-absorption, that draws us into prayer. That's who or what we pray to. I've heard Unitarian Universalists say they pray to the stars, to the ocean, to nature, to the interdependent web of existence, all ways of attending to, listening to, watching, waiting, lifting one's awareness beyond the self to the larger life of which all of us are a part. It seems to me that in this pandemic time, when we are so very isolated, so thrown back onto our own individual selves, sequestered in our homes, hiding behind our masks, we especially need that lifting of awareness. Praying for others might be a crucial way to keep the isolated lives we struggle with presently from becoming a morass of despair. Each week when we come to the time in our service where we share joys and concerns, we are doing a kind of praying for one another. Responding however you respond when you hear news of a marriage, a cancer diagnosis, a move to assisted living, healing from illness, the death of a loved one. I believe when we collectively hear and respond to those joys and concerns, we are offering profoundly important and effective prayers for one another. So in this pandemic, when we are thrown too much back on ourselves, may we resolve each day for just a few minutes to pray for somebody else, somebody who's troubling you, somebody you're grateful for. Imagine the face of that person surrounded by light. Don't get into saying any words, just see them in the light. And the next time when you're actually able to be around that person, whether physically present or just through Zoom, that moment when you held them in the light, that will be present as well. And by those small, insignificant steps, the interdependent web that binds us to one another becomes more and more a binding of love in ways we can see, in ways we may not see for a long time, but still absolutely there.
Today, before I begin Song 1002, Comfort Me from Singing the Journey, I ask of you to sing loud and proud from your homes, Great news is nobody can hear you, and so nobody will judge about how loud, how quiet, how in tune, how maybe not in tune you might be. But I hope that you enjoy and sing from your soul. The words you'll see are "Comfort Me," and we'll sing that for a verse, and then "Sing with Me," "Speak for Me," "Dance with Me," and "Comfort Me." Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me. Sing with me. Sing with me. Sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me. Sing with me. Sing with me, oh my soul. Speak for me. Speak for me. Speak for me. Speak for me, oh my soul. Speak for me. Speak for me. Speak for me, oh my soul. Dance with me. Dance with me. Dance with me. Dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me. Dance with me. Dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me. Comfort me. Comfort me. Comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me. Comfort me. Comfort me, oh my soul.
We extinguish our chalice flame, but never the fire of commitment and community.
Our closing words are by Reinhold Niebuhr. Nothing worth doing is completed in a lifetime. Therefore, we are saved by hope. Nothing truly profound and meaningful is ever fully understood. Therefore, we are saved by faith. Nothing we undertake, however noble, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. Shalom.
Salam.
Namaste.
Blessed be.
Stay well.